Hey everybody, this is Emmy at Astro Metalcraft. We are here again today with Shop Talk. We are going to talk a little bit about tariffs and the really fun things that have been coming down the pipeline in the past couple of weeks. And in addition to Tony, president of Astro, and Zach, head of purchasing, we are also joined by John Menk from McNeilus. Nice to have you, John.
Thank you.
We are really looking forward to hearing some of your insights.
We'll get there.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about your McNeilus and kind of what you do there and everything like that.
Yeah, McNeilus Steel has been in existence for 75 years. We're out of Dodge Center. We have a Fargo, Fond du Lac location as well as Tennessee. 90% of our products are carbon-based. The other 20%, 15, 10% would be aluminum and stainless steel. We're a wholesaler. So we kind of play an intermediary role between the mills and buy mill quantities and then break those down and then sell it to fabricators, welders, manufacturers.
Okay, and how big is the company?
We're kind of the 20th largest in the country.
Okay.
About 750 employees, roughly $800 million business.
Okay.
I've been with McNeilus for 13 years and really enjoy it. So if you're ever down at Dodge Center, love to have you tour it.
All right, great. Zach, kind of how long have we had a relationship with McNeilus?
Going on probably, I would say, it was kind of rekindled, I guess, 3 years ago.
Okay.
High demand for some steel projects, and having a high percentage of steel, carbon steel in your inventory is a good fit. So it's about 3 years now.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, let's just jump right in, get to the nitty gritty. Tony, kind of as the resident economist at Astro, why don't you kick it off by explaining a little bit about some of the recent tariffs that have come up? I know we have had aluminum and steel tariffs that have been brought up in the past couple of weeks, and just recently today there's been some more coming on. If you want to give a little download.
I don't know that I can do justice to exactly what's going on because the news changes so frequently. It's nearly impossible to keep up on. I guess the one of the most impactful or unique ones to the metals market is hitting Canada and Mexico harder than we've traditionally done. We've normally considered those two countries within the North American supply chain, and they've been treated as important partners. So especially getting a lot of aluminum out of Canada, it's unclear now what sort of effect tariffing Canadian aluminum will have when that is such a key place where we get a lot of our aluminum from. But I know there's a lot of steel capacity in the United States, so maybe a little bit less effect on those prices as far as we know. But
so, John, just kind of touch on that a little bit. Where are most of the mills that you guys get supplies from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of look at the family of products that we have and that are available within the steel realm, more like the periodic table, in that you don't have steel is steel and that's all it is. There's a lot of different applications, a lot of different types of steel, and we probably have a small percentage of what's available. From the stuff that we bring in, we have sheet steel, we have plate steel, we have tube steel, and then we'd have what we call bar products or structural steel. 80% of that is going to be domestic, and then we're going to have some that is from Canada. A lot of our sheet product is from Canada. But as Tony said, it's a relationship that we've had for many, many years that it really doesn't feel like it's going to impact us. The bigger piece that we've seen the immediate effect has been aluminum. As we think of aluminum, the three major producers of aluminum is Canada, Ukraine, and China. So if there's any change in the makeup of the markets, and those three countries are involved, then you're going to see some effects here. I think the other thing that we think about is that this is tariffs, and we want to make sure that the conversation is separate from COVID and what we remembered not so long ago with escalating prices and trying to decompartmentalize those two conversations. Because right now we have no problem getting material. We don't have any issues in the supply chain. It is just going to be priced a little bit different.
Okay. So Zach, to touch on that a little bit, what for the projects that we're working on and what we're ordering for, what do you see being affected the most for Astro projects?
So what I've seen so far, I think everything steel, stainless, aluminum is up slightly. Aluminum being the most. I saw an initial, I think it was early. Was it early March? Well, I think it was March 4th or 12th that when the 25% tariff went into effect. After the initial delay, there was I think it was a 10-cent base price increase on aluminum that I saw. There was a slight increase on stainless as well, but the aluminum one being the most volatile, I saw the biggest jump there.
Okay. And like, what would you say as far as Astro projects? What are we dealing with the most as far between aluminum and steel and stainless?
It varies. In the last month, we've dodged the bullet. We've been doing mostly stainless and steel. So aluminum has been a little bit lower. So we haven't seen a huge effect on that yet, but that's temporary.
Sure.
I would say a lot of the projects we have sold for later in the year, architectural work is a lot of aluminum. So there is concerns about whether those prices start to escalate. But hopefully John's right in that at least there's not some sort of supply shock or demand shock one way or another, and that would hopefully moderate any extreme swings. I think it's hardest on the industry when the prices can't be held for very long. The quoted time. Quotes are only good for a few hours kind of situations. We never like to be operating in that environment, and thankfully that doesn't appear to be the situation this time around.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about forecasting and where you guys are getting your information. It's how it's going to translate into how you do business. What are some of the resources or sources that you guys are going to kind of see what's coming up ahead, to know what you're going to do on the other side?
This is the easiest question probably up so far because
Yeah.
we don't do a whole lot of forecasting.
Okay.
Our material costs in-house, we know what it is. The stuff that isn't in-house, we don't know what that cost is going to be until it's shipped. So we do have some contracts that do affect it, but a lot of them are based on indexes, so it's always changing, ever changing. It's a commodities industry.
What about you, Tony? Where do you kind of look for insights on where to go in the future?
Yeah, great question. Well, there's everybody gives the expression that nobody has a crystal ball. So you just kind of have to piece little clues together as to what's happening, or what's going on, or what the real motivations are. I think some insights I've started to piece together is, there was a lot of what are these tariffs for? What are they all about? And a lot of the information at first it was about fentanyl coming across the border. And you dig deep enough and you find out that's probably just a pretense for what the real underlying reasons are. And, more and more I'm coming to believe that this is an attempt to rebalance trade relationships more than anything else. The United States dollar being a very strong currency used around the world for trade. There's a lot of demand for U.S. dollars, and that, as a result, puts U.S. manufacturers at a disadvantage trying to sell to the world. The world wants to sell to us, and that has hollowed out manufacturing in the United States over the last many decades now, since starting in the 50s, really, and even a little bit before that. So I think this administration is making a concerted effort to try to rebalance some of that trade disparity, and it's going to be very interesting to see if this works or if it just causes extra chaos for everybody involved. We're hoping, I guess the main advantage for us would be more competitive in the domestic market, but I don't know how it helps us to sell anything abroad, because trade wars just kind of freeze markets across borders. So we'll see how that plays out.
John, do you guys have any customers that aren't domestic?
We have a lot of customers that are global, so they are global sourcing and they're global selling. So for those companies, we have, like yesterday, I had a call on a guy that had some square tubing that they had been sourcing from Canada. Knowing that the tariff is going to come online, they said, do you have any domestic alternatives? We just want to be assured that we can get material not at that higher price, not have to have a higher price that we have to pass on to our customers. As I kind of hung up the phone and after that conversation, I was like, I'm sure Canada is doing the same thing, trying to find ways to reduce those 10% tariffs that we're imposing on them and try to either make trade relationships to eliminate those increased costs or do something internally. So it'll be interesting to see how the markets really settle out at the end of it, because everyone is trying to be cost containment at this juncture. I think as it evolves, then it gets into the other more inventory, cash management type positions, but right now it's about cost containment.
Okay. Zach, are you seeing, as estimates come in or requests for quotes, a lot more companies asking for that kind of Made in America stamp, and how do you kind of handle that with customers?
We do see that requirement on incoming requests for quote. That is, I don't know if that's necessarily driven by tariffs currently. That's a lot of government work. That's a requirement they have regardless. One of the things I do see from requests for quote coming in is concern, whether or not it needs to be domestic. We do see some concern if it's heavy on aluminum, but the project's not going to hit our floor until maybe later this year. They're very concerned about what that price is going to be. We are concerned about that, so we take special measures to try to counter that. But as far as the domestic requirements, so far nothing that I've seen that has been dictated by the tariffs and those.
But there are some soft costs. By having a domestic requirement, you have to now prove it. And having to prove it, you have to have all your paperwork behind it, as opposed to having an open-ended, then you can produce whatever you want a little bit more quickly and more adaptability with whatever you can get your hands on.
Correct.
As soon as it goes to M&M US, now you have to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and so if you ever get audited, you don't get penalized.
Correct, yeah.
So let's speak a little bit on concern about projects that are coming down the pipeline. John, are you seeing any sort of like panic buying from customers that are very concerned about projects way down the road and want to kind of build up an inventory? And how do you kind of manage those relationships?
We saw a huge panic buy in the month of February and into March. It really put pressure on our inventories. It put pressure onto the mills. And I think that's why we're seeing the price of steel specifically go up about 30% between end of January to today. How does this kind of settle out? I wouldn't advise anybody to buy heavy now, because we're kind of at that already, that ramp up. But Q3, do you buy heavy? Do you go light? That's the big question. Typically, June, July, we have a summer slowdown. Things may come back down again, and that might be a better time. If it's a little bit more where people are buying a little bit more here to either offset some of those foreign lack of material, and demand kind of peaks up, then we might go the other way. So it's really hard to forecast what June and July is going to look like, as opposed to 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, where things were very periodic, and first quarter being very strong, fourth quarter being very weak, and people kind of buying based on cycles. Right now, it's just the crystal ball is very,
Yeah.
very fuzzy. We really can't see
I
beyond
gotta
2 weeks.
imagine that's been hard for the mills to manage because, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a steel mill kind of has to maintain at a certain capacity. It's not like they can ramp up and ramp down very quickly without incurring large costs. Have they been proactively trying to ramp up with the situation, or are they just taking a more cautious approach to wait and see what the demand pans out to be?
Yeah, the mill utilization rate is always kind of a funny one for me because it's always around that 75%. And if they're really busy, they're close to 80% or 82%. If they're slow, they're down to 73. You never see it go from 90 to 50. I think the other thing that's happening in the mill level is the trend to go to mini mills, and they're able to kind of change their capacities a little bit better and adjust with the markets as opposed to the traditional blast furnace. The other domestically, we are adding a couple mills. One in Kentucky, which is a plate mill, and then another sheet mill down south. So we are adding capacity. If this new mill that Trump announced with Hyundai in Louisiana comes online, we'll continue to add more production. Typically, U.S. makes 80 million tons annually. In comparison, 80 million tons, 80 million versus 1 billion tons in China. So it's about 100 times difference between the two countries. So even though we don't make as much as we consume, we have China, which is no longer like in this growth mode with this excess. And that steel is going to find its way, somehow. And that's a little bit difference of this year's tariffs as opposed to the 2018s. 2018 was just saying, hey, sheet and tube and the raw materials can't come in. Now it's fabricated, assemblies, finished goods, and raw materials can't come in without the tariff. So I think that helps fabricators at that fabricator level have ability to have a level playing field as they did 5 years ago.
Yeah, at least domestically. I mean, if it's going to be a foreign buyer of the manufactured good, it will hopefully help us be more protected from foreign competition internally, but it shrinks. Now we're all in a smaller market, essentially. It's the downside.
Correct.
Yeah. With the mini mill thing you mentioned, I believe the mini mills can only process scrap material. Is that there kind of a limitation to how much mini mill capacity can be created, just because you would run out of scrap steel at some point?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a capacity on the scrap. I always think about it, well, what would happen if China needed scrap and all of a sudden started taking all the scrap from us and now increasing our scrap costs? I don't know that there's ever a shortage in it. Mini mill, the term came from how small it is in the footprint as opposed to the traditional blast furnace that used to be 3 miles long and really dusty and dirty that you used to see in the 1970s, 80s movies. The mills are going through decarbonization to try to eliminate all the carbon in the air and so forth. So a lot of investment into mills here domestically in Europe, not so much in China, and I think that's a little bit of the challenge too, is trying to get China to either reformulate their mills to be a little bit less decarbonized or reduce the number of mills so that way they're only producing the amount that they can consume to really stabilize that global supply and demand.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose there's always that talk of a flood of it, or they're dumping it somewhere, and they'll try to sell it by moving it first to Indonesia and then selling it out of there. It's interesting to hear all these different games that are played to try to skirt whatever policy decisions are going on.
Basic circumvention, and the International Trade Commission tries to look at those circumvention cases to try to protect certain markets. But it's true. as soon as we put a tariff on Chinese steel, it went to Vietnam, and we were getting Vietnamese steel. As soon as we closed that one, now it's going into Mexico, not as steel, but as steel parts and coming here. So it is a little bit of the shell game and trying to trace the shell. But again, it's the lack of growth in China not to be able to support their steel mills, or the excess production based on their communistic society, and not being able to move and adjust with supply and demand.
Sure.
Have you kind of seen something like this happen before, like as far as the tariffs and kind of what's happening? Is there any kind of replay that you've seen before, or is this kind of a new thing that's like, okay, how are we going to handle it? How are we going to get ready?
I think for our generation, the only really exposure we had to tariffs before this, there might be two instances. One, I think the first one that comes to my mind is Ferris Bueller, when Ben Stein came up and he said, anyone, the Hawley Smoot Act, right? And said, did that help or worsen our Great Depression? Anyone? That little Ferris Bueller, that was about the only time we've ever talked about tariffs or really economic forces in that terms. The other side is kind of how do we have these trade pacts, and how do we benefit from trade pacts? And it's never been in the negative of the tariffs, but how do we reduce those transactions to create a NAFTA, a USMCA trading region, or with Europe, or with China, South Korea, and in the Pacific, to reduce those. But from a tariff perspective, this is all fairly new. It's not like it's happens every 5 years with a new administration or a new Congress, right?
Yeah. I want to touch back a little bit on the U.S. manufacturing, and kind of the goal of these tariffs is to create more jobs, bring manufacturing back into the U.S. But recently, we've kind of seen a little bit of a lot of smaller shops closing and going out of business. Zach, I know you have a lot of contacts within our network of other smaller shops that we utilize for things. What are you kind of seeing as far as any businesses going out, shops going out of business, things like that?
I guess in the relationships that I have or we have here, there hasn't been any that have closed. There are a handful that are experiencing layoffs currently. They're slower. So I've seen a lot of that. I think that's not unique. I think that's kind of industry wide from what I've been hearing from other people. But no businesses that we work with that have closed. I know historically in the last few years, decade or so, I've heard the same thing with a lot of the smaller shops closing.
What about you, John? Have you been hearing that?
It's a little mixed bag. I think that there are some shops that have closed, and I think there's maybe succession plans with some, especially the smaller ones, that we have this aging population of 65, 70-year-old guys that are trying to sell their business or hand it down to the next generation, and it doesn't seem to have that next generation really there to step up. I think that labor force continues to be a challenge. I also think that there's a lot of opportunity, and a lot of people that have put a lot of money into new technology, into robots, into better lasers, into better operations. I think we're very smart people, and we always have some new things always popping up. So I'm excited about what 2025 brings, what 2026 brings. We're Americans, right? And we always seem to come up with something new. And I think that's the exciting thing about our markets, is that people come here for new ideas.
Definitely. Tony, as a business owner, what are some of the things that you're doing to kind of make sure that we're keeping our levels where they need to be? We're not having to do layoffs. We're pushing forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a two-pronged approach. It's one, we have to be focusing on executing on the work that we have and keeping the customer satisfied. So if they, I always say there's just another shop in every small town in the Midwest. So we need to be cognizant of that. We need to be one of the best options out there for our customers to go to. But then always be thinking ahead of how we can grow our customer base as well, and knowing where we can compete, and staying in that, finding the right niches to be in. You can't be everything to everyone. You can't compete on quality, lead time, and price all at the same time. So we make sure that we can find the right customers that are the right fit for us, and that we have the right capabilities to meet their needs. The capacity side of things is always very challenging because the customer's needs can go up and down, and we need to be agile enough to be able to dial up and down, but everybody wants a consistent paycheck. So, there's a lot of planning for that, to be able to be very adaptable. I mean, that's one of our core values that I think is helping us deal with all these different challenges and unique opportunities at the same time. We stay adaptable, and we do what we need to keep happy customers.
Sure.
I think that's interesting that, everyone has that identity crisis where you have your sandbox and everyone plays in their sandbox, and what they do inside their sandbox, they do very well. Half of your opportunities don't fall into that sandbox, and they come outside. And do you reach out and grab those opportunities and make it a core competency, or say we're true to our identity and that one is a little bit further out? So everyone's trying to adjust those borders of your sandbox to say, boy, here's a new opportunity. Is this something good for us, or is it not?
Yeah, I would like to see enough of a fit already with things we're good at. If you say, if you get too narrow-minded and say that we can't add that capability to service that customer, or you say this, it's fine. I look for an 80% match. If we got 80% looks like a good fit, what is our plan to get that last 20% of what we need to be competitive there? Obviously, it all comes down to economics. If it looks like a risky investment, we would have to put a lot of money into adding a capability, and we're unsure about the future of that business. We'll just say, no, thank you. Here's a recommendation of maybe somebody that can service you better. But everybody likes to say yes, as much as we can. It's just a balancing act.
Sure. All right. Well, kind of final thoughts. If you had one thing to leave our viewers with as far as reassurances that it's going to be okay, what would be your kind of final thoughts here, John?
Yeah, you look at not even 5 years ago, everyone was trying to get their hands on an RV or a car or a four-wheeler or a UTV, and you couldn't find it, and you're going on Facebook and you're paying way above price. It's not that way. Supply is still there. Things are going to be okay. This might be just posturing. Let's wait and see. By the time that we look at this video in 2 weeks, things could be completely different.
Right.
So look at what your demand is, what your current need is, buy for a week, and then revisit again for another week, because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, a lot of change.
And finish that real good. I mean, we're not selling the same commodities as John. We're a consumer of the metals. There's a lot of other factors that go into what the price is made up from us. So I stay cautiously optimistic that all of these different challenges are constantly changing dynamics. It'll all work out in the end if we stay adaptable and keep our head on a swivel.
All right, great. Well, thank you, John, for joining us.
Absolutely.
And we hope you guys check out our YouTube channel where you can find all of our Shop Talk podcasts, and we hope to see you in the next one.